Let's talk about death, having a terminal illness, and things that have helped me cope with that idea. I really contemplated making this video or not, because talking about death is pretty taboo, and some of the stuff is going to make me sound kind of woo-woo-y. And some of my opinions aren't fully baked. But I decided to make this anyways, because after having stage 4 cancer, being petrified of death, and losing many friends to cancer, there's a few things that have helped me cope. I thought it was worth sharing in case it helps anybody else, even if I come off a little woo-woo-y. As crazy as it sounds, one of the questions I get most often when people find out I have stage 4 cancer is, am I afraid? And I have cancer. I would be lying if I said I was not afraid. And when it came to my 3-month post-op scans, when I found out there was still cancer left behind, it got really ugly for a couple days. I did not want to ever go back on treatment, and I started to wonder what it was going to be like to die. I even started to look at hospice sites and try to understand what being on hospice was like. Which in itself felt wrong. It kind of felt like if I looked into death and what that was going to be like, was I just going to be giving up? It sounds really weird, but it just feels wrong to look into death. Then one day, scrolling through TikTok, I came across a hospice nurse Julie. And she was talking about end-of-life visions that people have. I'd heard of this in passing, but didn't think it was a real thing. And it's something that happens quite often. So I started looking into her videos, hearing accounts from other hospice patients. Then I started looking for a ton of research studies. And I went deep down the rabbit hole on near-death experiences and end-of-life visions. I told you I was going to sound woo-woo-y. I'm a skeptic by nature, so when I heard these accounts, the first thing I thought was, okay, there has to be a scientific explanation. So I read lots of research papers, and I tried to find any explanation I possibly could. Because while end-of-life visions and near-death experiences kind of sounded like a nice way to die, I thought surely that can't actually be the case. So as I read research papers, there were a couple explanations that sounded kind of plausible, but to me they still didn't explain the whole thing, and it left me with a lot of unanswered questions. So after doing enough due diligence and reading enough scientific papers, I decided to lean into the idea that maybe our consciousness continues after we die. And I've accepted that there may be a medical explanation for this one day. But instead of researching it to death like I normally would do, I was going to let this one be unanswered and just listen to these stories. Like I said, I don't know what my full thoughts are about them. My stance isn't fully baked, but I know they've brought me a lot of comfort, and some of the experiences even line up with the way my great-grandmother talked about an experience she had after a pretty big medical incident. So for me, I'm choosing to let that bring me comfort, even if I'm wrong, because I like the idea of thinking that my friends that have passed from cancer aren't in pain anymore and are surrounded by comfort and love.